So this is my workshop, Two Left Feet, and it's really put together using the information in the book, The Dominance Factor, put together by Dr. Carla Hannaford. And obviously she gives us permission to do this, and we just use her book as that manual. And so I absolutely love this book. Mine is kept somewhere safe because it becomes a book that you can work out of. And so in this book, not only does she give you what we're going through, but she also has mapped out the 32 different combinations of a way in which a brain can organize itself. And of course, she looks at the way what it means for a child or a person when they're stressed versus what it means for a person when they are in their gifted space, so not stressed. And what I love is she gives strategies for what we can do to help these kids and support them in the classroom and what moves they're going to need. What I'm not going to go through in this workshop, so if you do want to do her dominance factor where she's based completely on this book, she also takes this work and does balances with groups of people. And so balance is a process where we work on certain goals and certain stresses, and we take those and we see, well, how is the brain organizing itself in this space? And of course, through that balance, we can first of all allow all the people working together to appreciate each other's profile. And of course, we need to go through all of this for you to understand why we need to appreciate that. But of course, it is the reason that we do have some of the office spats and issues in our relationship. And then knowing that, the balance, so that we can move from that space to the space where we have access to our whole brain. And so, yes, just putting some hangers out there, some keywords. We're going to be looking at these things as we go through. So just going into the workshop, we just want to remember that no medical diagnosis, prognosis, or treatment will be or can be made due to the information shared in this workshop. The purpose of the workshop is to introduce you to the power of moving and learning. And if you enjoy the workshop, you're welcome to contact us for more courses. The ones in terms of this that goes a little bit more in depth is, as I say, the dominance factor. That course there's no real prerequisites for, if I'm understanding right. I might have to get back to you on that one. OBO, you have to have done Movement Facilitator 1 and then Brain Gym 101. And then, of course, you can get into OBO because you need to understand balances to be able to balance the profiles. So that's something that maybe if you enjoy this, we can look at later. It is important to remember, and we're going to see this in this particular workshop, that every person is unique. What works for one may not necessarily work for another, but again, we have got so many tools that we can play around with and use. And so we can definitely be optimistic as we look at the individuals and draw on that knowledge to assist. And then by continuing, you consent to the fact that you've understood this. We possibly are moving in this, so please, yes, I suppose I have to say that as well. Make sure that you're looking after yourself. If something hurts, stop. Don't do things that puts your body into stress. Look after yourself and take responsibility for your health. So in our work, we always start with a goal. And so maybe it's a nice opportunity to put down some goals for yourself. Why do you want to do this workshop? And maybe if you don't know what this workshop's about, I can put it out there a little bit more as to why I like this work, so that you can just consider where you might use it and what your goals would be. But for me, this work gives an understanding as to why we see that child who can think, who can speak, who can write, who can recall information at home when they're studying, and then all of a sudden they get to school and of course they can't understand what's going on. They don't see, they all of a sudden can't read the question nicely. They can't put forward their understanding, and so they have the understanding in their brain, but they just can't put it forward in a well, put together sentence for the teacher to understand. Or they know the answer and they just all of a sudden aren't showing the working out properly, which they can do at home. And I've got a lovely little story I'm going to read for us just now, just to show you how this actually happens. Not a real story, but I like the little journey that the writer takes us on, because we can actually see how children spiral. And, we've probably been in that place ourselves. For me, when I'm stressed, I really start panicking and I can't take any information in, which is quite bad, because You know, you need to be able to understand what the situation needs from you by reading that situation. And so for me, I absolutely have to calm down because I'm no use. I just start rattling off a whole lot of nonsense, trying very hard and pulling at straws. And often I'm not even answering the questions that people are asking because I'm just not taking in the question. My eye also tends to jump, and so I can't read the questions nicely. And this is the way I see my profile playing out. And so it's great in terms of our greater scheme of things. Where do I see this? You know, so often we work with kids when they are calm, and we see them when they're not in that space. But then these parents are reporting to us things that, you know, we're not seeing when we're working with a kid, things that are happening in school. And this gives us a way to show those parents, why is it that all of a sudden Johnny doesn't have a cooking clue what's happening? You know, and the minute he's calm again, he's back in the car and he's breathing and he's moving, which we're going to see is so important. And now all of a sudden he has access to everything and he's able to answer the question. But when he needs it most, it's not there. We see it with kids with speeches. They can do their speech at home, but the minute they stand up in front, they can't get the words out. They just can't, you know, they can't move forward. And of course, we're going to go into the nitty-gritties. So yeah, if you need to stop and just think of it for yourself, maybe where you can use it in your life, in your space, this is probably a great opportunity here to do that. So I love the story, and it's a beautiful little one to have on hand to take parents through. You know, how do these children move from whole brain thinking to the profile, and how does it play out? And so this is the TV Kid from Betsy Byers, if I've said it right. And I absolutely love this. I think I mapped out this kid I must think where, somewhere. Obviously, he's a fictional kid. So anyway, let's just read. And of course, as I say, if you want this, let me know. I have at least typed it out. It is an extract from her book. But it's nice, as I say, to be able to just pass on. So Lenny leant over his desk, pencil in hand, waiting for the science tests to be passed out. He always got a worried feeling when he was waiting to take a test. So yeah, we got the stress coming in. Even if he knew everything there was to know about a subject, something that had never happened, he knew he would still be worried. Okay, there we go, anxiety. He erased a mark on his desk and penciled it back. He beat out the rhythm from the Addams Family, snapping his fingers when he got to the 2 clicks. He jiggled his legs. He turned to the boy sitting next to him and said, "Hey, Frankie," I hope I say these words right. I'm glad I'm not taking this test. "Is the petiole the stem, or is the stipple the stem? I'm mixed up." Frankie shrugged. He turned round. "Letty Bond is?" "The petiole is the stem," she said in a bored voice, "and the stipples are the extra leaves." She clicked open her ballpoint pen. Betty Bond, if I've got this right, has actually got it wrong when she's answering him. But of course, she's a confident little kid. We can hear this. And so now she said this with confidence, even though Lenny actually knew it before he asked her. And we're going to get to that part. So Lenny turned round, back to the front of the room, and raised his hand. "Miss Markham?" "Yes, Lenny." "Can we take our tests in pencil, or do we have to have a ballpoint pen?" "Pencil's fine." "But can we use a pen if you want to?" He asked on behalf of Letty Bond, who he thought might be growing anxious. Either one is fine. So again, we see this kid, he's now starting to stress about everything. He's even stressed about poor Letty Bond, who isn't stressed about herself. So we can just see how, you know, the stress is starting to play into it. Lenny's throat was dry. The tests were coming. He put down his pencil, wiped his hands on his shirt, and picked up his pencil. He took the test from the girl in the front of him, selected the top, and passed the rest to Letty Bond. So again, we see now the physical sensations or whatever happening now from being in that parasympathetic state. He's actually now physically starting to feel stressed. His hands are starting to sweat. And so this is why he's needing to wipe. "Well, here we go," he said with false liveliness. He glanced at Betty Bond. She had already written her name on the top of the test and was ready to take the first question. Lenny turned back to his desk. The test was mimeographed in purple ink, And for a moment, Lenny had a vision of another red 23 at the top of his. He let out his breath in one long unhappy sigh. He felt like writing 23 there and saving Miss Markham the trouble. Glancing down the page, he decided to skip the first part, which was all fill in the blanks, and go to the second part, which was a plant with all the parts to be labeled. He had done this last night for the school teachers twice. And so here, in terms of our work, we see a little bit of the left leg, the green leg, this jumping around and not working through things in an orderly fashion, step by step. And of course, that comes out a little bit just now. There was something else I just wanted to comment on. Oh, there we go. So yes, him just wanting to write that 23. So we have these limiting beliefs. So he's already now triggering all the past events and all the past tests, all the negativity coming up. And so this is putting him again even more so into this profile. So we can also just see how his actions are not helping calm him down. In fact, everything he's doing is stressing him out even more. Very carefully, he printed the word petiole in the line opposite the stem. Then he looked at the word. It looked wrong. Quickly, he turned his pencil and erased the word. He wet his lips. So again, more stress. He wanted to turn round and ask Letty Bond if she was sure the petiole was the stem. It seemed to him. Nervously, he printed petiole back in the same place. So again, he was right. If I'm right, the stipple is the stem, and the petiole has to do with the top by the flower. So he printed in 4 more words, and then he got up. With his eyes on the paper, he went to the teacher's desk. Miss Markham, yes, Lenny, is that word spelled right? I'm sorry, but I can't give you any help after the tests are passed out. Oh. He stood there for a moment staring down at the word he had written, stapile. He had never felt more miserable in his life. He gave Miss Markham a weak smile. He said, I feel kind of stapile myself today. I do believe, though, Miss Markham went on kindly smiling back at him, you should look at what you've written very carefully. There may be something wrong. Thank you, Miss Markham. So just commenting on that previous page before I continue, he actually wrote the right word in. Thank goodness he didn't listen to Letty Bond, but of course the spelling was wrong. And so what we're seeing is that actually there is a lot of potential here for poor little Lenny. But of course with the stress and everything, you can just see how everything is going. And so the spelling words, when we forget that, it's almost, I can think that this child is more of a ripe brain kid. And so we don't see the details or remember the details, we forget them. We'll get into that. But of course, this is now what's playing out. As Lenny hurried back to his desk, Miss Markham said, remember, spelling counts, class. And so she's giving him that hint. I hope he's listening, because in that she'd actually, but again, if you stressed, depending on your profile, maybe you can't. If he had listened, he actually would have been able to read, hopefully, between the lines and hear that the word is correct, but the spelling is incorrect. And of course, this is a lovely teacher doing her best to try and guide him. So Lenny raised the word and respelt it. So maybe he did listen. He filled in 2 more blanks and then erased one. His test now had a worked overlook. He had worn through the paper in 2 places. He thought that everyone who thinks school isn't hard ought to take a look at his paper. And this is the thing we're going to get into with these right brain kids. He bent over his desk, wet his pencil point, and filled another blank. He went on to the multiple choice section and filled in 3 of those. So now he's just kind of pulling at straws again. He glanced again at the word stapile. Time's up, Miss Markham said. Lenny looked up, startled. He turned to Frankie. Are you through? Frankie shrugged. Are you through, Letty Bond? I've been through since 10:30, she said. She glanced at her desk. She was writing a note to someone named Anne. It started, I'm bored. Lenny spun round and glanced in desperation at his test. Only half of the blanks were filled. Quickly he began filling in the rest, guessing, putting anything down so that Miss Markham would see a full, complete sheet when she got to his test. That was bound to make a better impression. Lenny? It was Miss Markham. Yes, He kept writing. He did not have the time to look up. I have to have your test now. Yes, the next class is coming in. One more word. In desperation, Lenny kept writing. Cammy Hagedorn was standing by his desk, waiting to take Lenny's seat. Lenny looked up. Hard, huh? Cammy said. Hard for me, Lenny sighed. He got up, dropped his test on Miss Markham's desk, and went out into the hall. Shoulders sagging, he went slowly to World Studies, and shame. So now he's going to enter that next classroom in this very depressive, sad, defeated state. So we can just see, and again, they start off class or the day with one silly spelling test, and it might not even be for that many marks. But of course, when they've gone through this, and of course they get to the end and there's just no reward or celebration or dopamine release for the fact that they've got through and they did it and they did the best that they can, this starts really impacting the rest of the day as well. And so maybe it's better to put this into a way in which we could understand it. But for me, I always find it amazing how when it rains, nobody can drive. And I really do believe that it's because, these people are driving in their profiles. When the day is sunny, when there's no traffic, yes, we drive very well, hopefully. There's still those people who don't. But of course, we can handle it. We can put the radio on. We can sing our song. We can be talking to somebody. We could be lost in our own thoughts, which we shouldn't do too much. But we're coping with what's happening. Now we add to the scenario the rain and the traffic and this windscreen wiper that's activating our morrow as it flashes in front of our eyes. And we've got the kids talking in the back, talking louder than the heavy rain, because now they've had to talk louder because they can't hear each other. And perhaps you've still got the radio on from just before. And so what do we do in this moment? It's crazy, don't we? We scream, we have a meltdown. Okay, so yes, us adults have meltdowns. When we lose our stuff, it's a meltdown. It is what it is. And maybe even a tantrum if we're trying to get attention. I don't know, up to you to decide. But what do? We tell the kids to shut up. We turn the radio off. We move our position forwards, right forwards, to try and see through that windscreen. And it's funny how we say shush so that we can see. But what we're doing is we're trying to calm down the senses because there's just so much happening for us to have to cope with. And so we're trying to eliminate some of that stress so that we can cope with the most important stress, staying alive at this point. And of course, once we calm down, we go back to putting the radio on, talking to each other. And so we experience this. And of course, if I had to ask you while you're busy driving like this and you're fearing for your life, because yes, these taxis are cutting in and out, they're driving so badly, and it's dangerous to drive on our roads, especially in these conditions. If I had to ask you now to please do a math sum, you'd tell me, first of all, I'm crazy because I'm trying to just survive the situation. But this is what happens in our bodies with stress. Our body doesn't understand the difference between a life-threatening thing like driving in the car in the rain, or a lion coming to attack you, or the test. And so what happens is the blood moves from our head, goes to our heart and lungs to get oxygen, and in order to pump the adrenaline to the body parts. Our hands get cold, our feet get cold. That's another thing that we could notice. And what we're doing is we really just become very reactive, very impulsive often in that moment, until we're able to calm down and then think. So that rest and digest is where we can think clearly. But so often when we're in stress in the classroom, when we need to think, our brain is in survival. So just a few questions for yourself. Notice your own response. Think of that moment of stress, whether it's the car or wherever, if you can think back to one. Think about, how did you feel? What kind of emotions did you have in that moment? Were you nervous? Were you stressed? Were you anxious? Think about the feeling. Were you feeling unsafe? What sensations in your body? Were you like Lenny? Did you have sweaty hands? Did you have a pounding heart? Did you have a tight chest? Think about your thinking. How clearly you were able to think. Were you able to take information in? Were you able to process that information? What, using your hands and your ears and your eyes and your feet. Think about think about a place where you feel at ease now in comparison. And just now, as you shift in your mind's eye from that one space to the next, think about the difference in your feeling. Think about the difference in your sensations in your body. And think how clearly you're able to think there and then. Notice that difference, because that's the difference that we're going to see as we look at these profiles, this limiting profile and versus our gifted space. These are the contents in her book, what she will take you through. So, of course, here we're going to also go through the introduction, what is a learning profile, profiles in relationships, whether this be in your personal life, so how they play out there or at school, profiles and their stereotypes, learning aids and strategies, movement menus, and then, of course, you can get hold of me with any of your questions. So we'll begin with one of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein. Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And so this is kind of the aim of understanding these different profiles. So we begin, as we said before, that everybody is unique, and educators and psychologists have developed many systems to try and identify and generalize diversity in order to better understand the individual. And so we've got to be so careful of this. It's almost like a safety mechanism. If I can put somebody else in a box, they become more predictable and I feel safe. I know what to kind of expect from them. But of course, we're not made to fit into boxes. And understanding these profiles, again, offers us the opportunity to see children as differently. We use also in our, not all of them, but in our profile sessions, we do use some of the Myers-Briggs stuff. We do the Enneagram. We look at Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences when we look at a kid. We look at the different learning styles. And of course, we can just touch on some of that there in this workshop here or there. But of course, these are all ways in which we've created boxes to put people in. And as much as we're doing that, we've got to again understand that they're not going to fit completely in these boxes and to allow them to breathe and move between. Everyone is unique. And so we look at taking the whole child into account, and this allows us to plan educational and training programs with greater insight. It helps us to cater for each child's unique needs. This information is of great value both in and outside the classroom, and parents and teachers, even work colleagues and partners, can greatly benefit from this knowledge. So this is a profiling system based on characterizing learning styles, which was first developed by using muscle checking or applied kinesiology. And so that's just to explain a little bit of this work. So yes, I think, we chunk up and then we chunk down, and we don't want to scare you. So yes, we understand that each child is unique, but having said that, there are only 32 profiles with regards to this. And so within those 32 profiles, we can then see also the uniqueness of each and how they play out. But it just means getting back to the personalities as well. I use the Enneagram. There are 9 personality types there. So if I've got a general understanding of how it all works, it means that I don't have to obviously understand everything at the get-go. I can understand the basics, and then I can start looking for how is this child, using or accessing these things. And that again gives me a better space to respond to them. And of course, as much as we see there's 32 profiles, movement and breathing will move them from that profile back to whole brain thinking. So I wanted just to stop and pause here. This is the work of Dr. Chuck Hillman. He's also a kinesiologist, and he put together this research for schools in America who wanted to cut recess or break and stop PT. And so we can see the difference in this child's brain. So he took 20 children. He did the MRI with them after having sat still for 20 minutes. And then, of course, he let them walk for 20 minutes, and then he did this MRI again. And what we first notice is that sitting still pushes this child into this profile, because this is an actual profile we can see playing out in this MRI. And so sitting still is a stress on the body. In Brain Trainer U, the guy explains, I can either think of something stressful, and that makes my body respond to that stress that I'm feeling inside, or my body can react in a certain way, and this is where our reflexes come in, and then this puts our brain into that state of stress. And so sitting still, when I'm stressed, what do? I hold my breath, I sit still, I play possum. And so sitting still for too long tells the body, yes, I'm stressed. And I think that's why, well, that's what I believe, and that's why we see us moving into the survival brain type organization when we are sitting too still in class and we're not given the freedom to move. And so the left side, you can see they've actually got that longitudinal fissure there shown quite nicely so that we can divide the brain into the two hemispheres. And if red and oranges are the areas of highest activity, you can see this child actually hasn't got any red or orange in the first picture. All on the left, and then all at the back. So the left side we'll see just now is, yes, thank goodness for him, very logical, but he doesn't have much access to the right for the creativity and the comprehension side. And again, more at the back. So again, very pulling away, reserved, more in the receptive space there in our work. Then he goes and he moves into his gifted space. And so for him, we still see that that left brain is more dominant, but he's now got so much more access to that right brain. And of course, we're seeing beautiful colors like red and orange. And so we got to understand when we talk about this gifted space doesn't mean that we're going to use both sides equally as such. Because if I'm going to walk and I've got both legs as being dominant, which leg would I step forward with first? You know, then I can't walk because then I'm almost going to be jumping along. And so there is a leading side and a supporting side for us. But that's what we want. We want a leading and supporting. Where do we in that stress profile, we gate off, we call it. And so we lose that supporting side. And when we did the OBO training, it was so interesting because I was the guinea pig for the one thing, and the lady asked me to write something on a board, which I did. And when I was thinking of the stressor and had moved into this space, I was writing with my right hand, but my left hand could have been behind my back because it was like it wasn't there. And after having done some movement and got the brain going, I wrote the second time. We noticed that my left hand actually was up higher, almost ready to jump in if I needed to turn a paper or tear it or do whatever. Whereas as before, it was not available for help. So who is Carla Hannaford? We can have a look on YouTube. She's actually got some nice videos up if you want to see her in person and just get a sense of who she is and how she talks. She explains things so beautifully. But with regards to this book, we see that Dr. Carla Hannaford began using it, being obviously this tool, as a counseling tool for students who felt alienated. She is a neuropsychologist using her physiological understanding of the brain while working with children. And of course, it could easily show her how students organize their brain, being obviously this work, their bodies and their nervous system. And as a teacher and scientist, this link made a huge amount of sense to her. And so, of course, we're going to see some of her case studies in this book. So why is this information so valuable? So for many, this information was a great sigh of relief, both academically and personally. So many people felt that their profiles were not being accommodated in the educational curriculum. Some of these people, or many of these people, found that they couldn't communicate under stress. So here you're having all these issues, and we can see this with kids. Parents will often say, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And this child just can't get what's wrong out. And of course, this is one of these profiles. And it also showed them that their difficulties were not permanent or pathological. So this is a big one because so many people do believe that the issues that we're seeing must be a disorder, must be something wrong with which the brain is thinking. And of course, with regards to this, it's not about what the brain is capable of doing, but obviously it is the way in which the brain thinks under stress. And so, yes, as I said earlier, when we test children and they're in this state, we really are not testing their true sense of what they can do, their true potential. We're testing how well they can cope under stress. And so teachers absolutely need to start understanding this. I want to be able to test children who are in that gifted space, who have access to everything, because then I'm testing their knowledge. If I'm testing them and they're stressed, and we can chat about some ways we can help teachers and parents to assist these children in moving out of these spaces when stressed. But when I'm testing them and they have access to all, I can see what they can do. And that's what I want. A test must reflect the child's full potential, not their test-taking skills. I love this image. Okay, so what can we do with this information? So this information allows us to see each child as an individual, noticing their strengths and areas they may experience difficulties, to practice compassion as we understand individuals better and to become more flexible in our approach towards them, to adapt and plan the educational and teaching programs, and to offer practical steps using constructive insight to assist people rather than labeling them, and in so doing limiting the view they have about themselves and their capabilities. Using this information to assist them in their relationships, in learning, place of work, and even in the social skills needed in play. And so yes, these come straight out the book and are so relevant in being able to explain to a teacher and a parent why is this information important. So I just wanted to add these extra things. I don't know if you like to use them. So got this out of my psychology book when I was studying teaching, and there's the reference, Galant and Galant 1990. So an ancient Zen story tells of 3 teachers debating which approach was best for educating pupils. The first likened his pupils to empty vessels, reliant on him for filling their heads with knowledge. The second spoke of himself as a potter and his pupils the clay that needed to be shaped into the idea of which they should look like. The third teacher was different. He treated his learners as if they were plants and he the gardener. Each plant, tree or shrub needed different balance of water, light and nutrients. He shared that he didn't water the cacti or cactus as he would a rose, nor did he nurture a seedling as he would a mature tree. So again, these type of approaches allow for us to be more of a gardener as we respond to the children as opposed to, come at them with stuff. And so that is a very big theme in our work. We talk about drawing out educational. Educare comes from the word to draw out. And of course, kinesiology is the study of movement. So through the study of movement, through using movement and observing it, we are drawing out the true potential of kids. And that is our goal. So getting back to where we were, since we sidetracked, we want to understand that there's all these labels in the world and school, and sadly schools really support the medical route. So when they're overwhelmed, and again, I'm talking as a teacher myself, and from the experience I have, so it's not a judgment, but more of an observation, but when we don't have the skills because we haven't been taught them to deal with these kids, we start trying to label them. And of course, if we can't label them, we start steering children off to get labels. Because if they get labels, then somebody else can step in and help. It doesn't just become our problem. And I feel it's because teachers are feeling powerless. So having this information is really a tool in your kit so that you don't have to feel powerless. You can look at a child and you might not have or be able to diagnose, as we spoke about before, but you can look at the little components that are coming up that become the questionnaires, that become the way in which to diagnose kids. And we've got to be careful because as much as there is the ADHD and dyslexic and autistic labels, there's also the naughty, bad, stupid, rude, clever, wonderful children that we're labeling. So all labels are limiting, even the positive ones. If I tell a child how wonderful they are, they're under that pressure to perform just as well the next day as well. So we have to be careful to not label children. So, and unfortunately, as we all know, the only way these teachers or many teachers know to try and get the support they need is that there's only one route. Okay, and there are many different routes to get the child the support they need when we start looking at what makes up these things. So I'm babbling now, let me carry on. So often schools cater only for certain types of learning. When learners do not learn in the way in which they're teaching, or in the way in which teaching takes place, they often get a label. We hear labels such as gifted and talented, but we also hear labels like special education. There seems to be a link between children's learning profiles that are not matched with the instructional method and an increase in ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, and other emotional handicaps. I always keep ADD and ADHD separate. I was moaned at by a psychologist for that because apparently it's not politically correct. However, when we start looking at brain patterns and the work of Dr. Daniel Amen, he's actually mapped out 7 different types of concentration issues. So ADD being that there's not that hyperactivity, and ADHD being that there is. So why do I include that? Again, to just understand that children are unique and we need to treat them that way. We also are too quick with our labels without understanding the different learning, how the different learners learn. Have I written that right? We have been too quick to label without understanding the different learners' learning profiles. There we go. And so that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, so we're going to look first, what is the learning profile? This can be referred to as a learning profile or the lateral dominance profile or even the stress profile. And so when I'm talking about it, I have to be quite careful because I tend to jump around between all of them, and I think that creates some confusion with parents. And so maybe it's best to explain what it is and then give it that label. But basically it is, yes, the way in which a child learns. So it's a learning profile. It is also based on the lateral dominance of that person. So it is a lateral dominance profile. But it's also the brain organization or the profile that we see under stress. So in that way, it could also be referred to as the stress profile. And so I think it's just a few keywords to play around with and see which ones parents actually are open to and understand more. So the lateral dominance pattern shows our behavior as we interact in relationships, in work and in play, and when learning in new or stressful situations. It has been compiled using the findings of Dr. Carla Hannaford, a neurophysiologist, and her work with the learners and teachers, and her goal was to simplify with distortion methods for determining profiles and to provide strategies in order to benefit individuals. Identifying our learning preferences points us to concrete ways to honor and assist each person's individual method of processing information. I find this fascinating. So apparently we're going to read this. This happens. Do we read? Yes. That this profile, we get a basal profile as well. They can be different, but I don't want to get into all the nitty-gritties. So I'll chat about it a little bit more just now. But how do we look at this? So it's a personal assessment technique to assess the different stress or learning preferences. This information can be used to implement useful strategies and to assist learning, relationships, and creativity. There are 32 different profiles that looks at how we take in the information, assimilate and process sensory information, and then how we respond and express that new information. And so yes, it comes in through our ears and through our eyes. So that's what we're going to be looking at, our dominant ear and eye, taking it in. Then we look at the different hemispheres. So which hemisphere are we processing it with and what does that mean? And then of course we express it through our hand and our foot in our profile. So that is our sensory organs that kind of are the output, if I could explain it as such. So Dr. Carla Hannaford believes that these developed at 9 weeks in utero when the Moro reflex develops for survival. So we see reflexes coming out in utero to protect this baby. So it's part of our survival kit with a way in which the brain likes to organize itself. If you do muscle testing, you could even look for something, as I say, called the basal profile, which might be different to the dominance profile. So the basal profile is which way the brain was organizing the hand, the foot, the eye, and the ear, and the brain hemisphere in utero at 9 weeks. Whereas as my dominance profile, I'm going to see which is their dominant foot, their dominant hand, ear, eye, and that's all of them, I think. Yes, okay, makes sense. When we've got kids where we've got this like ability to, or battling between two hands, and that we might have to have a look and see, is that basal profile different? But that could also be related to reflexes such as the ATNR. And so, yes, there is a little bit more things to get into there, but it's not stuff that we really need to get stuck on now. Just notice if you've got a child who's battling, so they're using this hand and they're using that hand, you might want to take a look at that other one. And in order to do that, we might just need to take you through muscle checking, which we're going to go through anyway. So this is in order to react quickly to survival situations. So yes, when I'm stressed, I absolutely need to know which hand, which foot, which thing to respond quickly. Okay, and we see this in newborns. When laid on their backs or their tummy, they will turn their dominant ear out to listen for danger. If danger is perceived, the baby will respond with the Moro reflex. And you might notice that, so just a little thing to consider. When you're in a new place, which side do you sleep on? Okay, and then when you are home and safe, do you sleep on a different side? Because with regards to this, what we might tend to do is when we're feeling a little bit more vulnerable, we sleep so that our dominant ear is open and listening. But when we feel safe, we often then might sleep, or we might sleep on our dominant ear, putting that on the pillow so that we can really relax and go off to sleep. The nervous system obviously is a highly complex system that coordinates actions and sensory information. It transmits to and from different parts of the body. The brain is seen as the meaning maker. So all parts of the body supply raw information that the brain uses to learn about the world. Research shows that higher cognitive processes are grounded in bodily experience. We can't process the plot of a story without stimulating the body sensations it evokes. Even making facial expressions affect how we feel and interpret emotional information from another person's face. So we know that when the grumpy child is pulling a face, what do? We do our best to make them laugh or smile, because the action of smiling and laughing, helps them move from that space. And this is all the theory behind it, so we're just getting this done. Okay, we're living, breathing humans. We are never cast in stone, and it's vital to appreciate all the things that make us different. And so, yes, with these profiles as well, we always just tell the parent, this is the current profile. We could, through muscle checking, also map different profiles. So you might actually even find that you get different profiles for every single different subject. Okay, and that's where we use our muscle checking. And so it's just to show we've got this brain that's reorganizing itself all the time. We've got stuff like neuroplasticity going on. And so it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, and so we can have different brain organizations, as I was saying, for different situations. Emotional triggers. So an emotional trigger also triggers a neurological path or pattern. And that's what we use in our OBO work. Again, if you want to get into all those nitty-gritties, or the dominance factor, we're doing kind of some of her stuff here, but the OBO work really gets into this, and muscle checking for the brain organization, as for like when I'm driving, or when I'm sitting in a classroom, or when I'm sitting in geography. So that's quite fun. So consider how you feel and react under stress, and when you are confident and ease, which we did that little thing before. And as I said, muscle testing is a great tool to have. Many people are a little bit nervous about muscle testing, but I'll explain to you how I share it with people, what I do, and you can just play around with all of it. I don't feel or believe that you can go muscle check for the lotto numbers and things that you don't know. In my understanding, you can muscle check what you do know, what the subconscious understands. And the subconscious, we come to learn, stores all of our movement patterns. So when movement has become automatic, it's driven by the brain, by the subconscious brainstem mesh. Yeah, okay. And of course, this is why people can analyze handwriting, because if handwriting has become automatic, as you're handwriting, the movement of your hand, that stroke of your hand, is revealing your feelings. It's revealing what the subconscious is thinking. And so in the same way, movement and muscles respond to what is true for us and what isn't. And so when we do muscle testing, we will make a statement, and then we see if the body is agreeing with that statement or not as such. And so it's a feedback system, okay? Every muscle and every organ in the human body is in communication with one another, making you a complex information exchange system. And so one way you can just play around with it, if you've got a chance to now, is just stand and relax, because we want to just notice what the body does. So don't control it, don't override anything. So when you're relaxed and you're still, just think about your favorite food and just notice, does your body move forwards, backwards, sideways? So I've had kids who move even sideways. We want to see what it moves towards. Okay, most people we see a forwards movement, but that doesn't happen for all people. So it's just to see what is your favorite food, and you can say the statement, my favorite food is pizza, and then notice which way your body moves. And so that would be a yes, your body's in agreement with that. If we had to say we hate mushrooms, and I say my favorite food is mushrooms, we want to notice then what happens when we tell ourselves something that's completely untrue. And in that we get a yes, okay, and we get a no. We get what the body's in agreement with and what it isn't. And so I'm using a lot of that in my workspace, because of course there are arm checks and there are finger checks, but people can always say, oh, you pushed harder, or, you know, and there's that room for speculation. Whereas if they notice that movement in their own body, they can see that I had nothing to do with that, and that this is genuinely their body responding to something that's truthful for themselves and something that is not truthful, when they're being authentic and when they're not. The history of muscle testing, okay, it's on page 160 in her manual, in her book. It's developed by Dr. George Goodhart. I always think what a lovely surname to have, and that was done in 1964. From his work with Terence Bettert, chiropractor, 1920s, Frank Chapman, osteopath in the 1930s, R.W. Lovett, orthopedic surgeon in the I've got to fix that, you won't see the mistake. I've got 11,932. So in 1932, and Dr. Henry and Florence Kendall working with polio patients in 1949. So what I want to show you is that these were medical people, these were our scientific people. So muscle checking is not this wishy-washy pie in the sky type stuff. No, it was actually developed by people who were working in the medical field and using it to help them in their work. Okay, so with proper intention and procedure, it is a very accurate way to assess the body. It hardwires the conscious and the subconscious beliefs and structural functions, such as the basal dominance. That basal dominance, again, I spoke about. If you want to get that, you would muscle check and you'd say, in utero, my left hand was dominant. And then if you're using the standing one I just spoke about, you would notice if they move forwards or backwards and which was their yes or no. In utero, my dominant eye was my left or my right. In utero, my dominant foot was my left. See what happens. In utero, my dominant hand was my right. See what happens. In utero, my dominant hemisphere was my left. And of course, by that you can map out what we will call, she calls a little domino man just now. Okay. So we can use this to tap into the body's information system, and the muscles become the transducer for the subconscious or innate patterns that are difficult to assess directly. So we're bypassing the conscious because we're using movement. The intention is the key factor, so that's why we must have a nice clear statement when we do it. And our muscle spindles allow for that feed forward or feed backward system. And there are a few ways to muscle check. So here's just a couple of ways. There's the forwards and backwards standing one. That one is the easiest, I must say, for people to get, what I've experienced. And they just get so excited when they can feel it. but it doesn't always mean the forwards is a positive. So let them play around. There are instances where people go backwards for their yes and forwards for their no. But again, you can just see she's standing relaxed, her legs aren't locked. It's good to just get them to do a few breaths before, so that they're not holding their breath and tightening their muscles. So there's that one. The arm one is the other one that we use quite a lot in our work, but as I say, I've started steering more towards a standing. So then they put their arm up at 45 degrees and you tell them to hold, don't tell them to resist, because then it's very hard, because then they think it's an arm wrestle. And you're going to then push just lightly with, I usually use my hand just a bit light, and of course it's the same pressure for each, for the yes, for the no. And you'll notice if it's a no, you're going to see the arm go down. They will not be able to hold it up. What I do have to do sometimes with that is also, there is maybes. There's also like half yes, half, so you get like an iffy muscle test for that. And so what we have to do then is just say, I want a yes and a no. And then just make that statement so that we can just get that a little bit better. There's a finger mode. So there you can put index fingers to thumb and you make a chain, and you see how easily it is to pull that finger through. And so your yes often is strong and it doesn't let the hand move through, but your no means that that chain can be broken as you pull your hands apart. So play around with that and just see if you get that one. The one in the middle here, so your ring finger is a weak finger. So we put our ring finger to our thumb, and that's going to be the hand that we're checking. And then we use with the other hand our index finger with our thumb. And that goes into that hole where our ring finger is holding our thumb. And of course we try hold it. And we see if the yes holds and the no opens. Again, it could be the other way around, and you might get the yes opening and the no holding. And so just get your yes or no, just see how it responds. And again, just as we do this, a caution, this is why I battle to do myself. We can override it with our own feelings. So if we're thinking yes, 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 and I'm not actually just allowing the body to respond, I can override that answer. So we've got to try not get into our heads as we do this. The other little one there is just putting your middle finger on that index finger and trying to resist. Should I say resist? Hold. And see how easy it is for that middle finger to push it down. If your yes holds further, if your yes, that index finger can hold. If your no, it's easier to bend down. But basically, we're seeing the muscles, the strength of the muscles decrease as such. And so we do have, and that's when you get the other way around, what we call a transposed brain. And again, they go into detail in the OBO course with that. But we don't need to understand that for this. We just want to establish a yes and a no first. And then if we've got that, it doesn't matter, we can use it. I can explain a bit of transposing just now. If I get the chance, if it comes up, I want to see if it does come up. But transposing just means that, yes, it's saying it's the left brain that's dominant, but the way in which the left brain is wired is actually the functions of the right on that side. I was listening to, who was I listening to? Oh, with all the brain, because I was trying to look at the brain for the neurofeedback stuff. And there was a lot of people who said if a person's left-handed, the language is swapped. So I must put on my camera. Let me see if I can show you. Maybe it won't let me now. But I wanted to show you a trick with that, because it's not necessarily the case. But yeah, let me get a camera in my next slide and I'll show you. Okay, so just before we get into that, so the people who do the brain stuff say if you are right-handed, then your language sense is here, your Broca's here, and your Wernicke's is here. But if you're left-handed, then they reckon that it's transposed. That's not always the case. So we actually need to look at the hand grip, again, from our OBO work. And so you get the classic hand, okay, where the person's writing like that. But then you get these kids who are writing like this. And so our thumb represents the brain. And so this is a better way to see where is that dominant, where's the Broca, where's the Wernicke. Is it a person who's actually got on the other side? So if you go, they're writing like this, you go like this, you can see it's coming from this hemisphere. Okay, if they are writing like this, it's coming from this hemisphere. Same with the other hand. They're writing like this, it's coming from this side. They're writing like this, it's coming from this side. So that's far better because, as I say, the thumb is our brain, and that's showing where am I linking this language that I'm writing to, this side or this side. Okay, so I don't think I can switch me off, so you'll have to look at me as I read this. So lateral dominance, we're going to look which side do we choose to think from, which is our dominant eye, which is our dominant ear, which is our dominant hand, which is our dominant foot, and then which, and can we muscle check this? So you can play around with that as well. If you want to pause here and try that, see can you do your muscle checking that we've just done. So remember the one is the chain, so like that, yes, no. The other one is the ring finger, the index finger, oh, yes, no, that often happens. We can do, oh, can you see me? Yes, no, okay. And then we might get yes and no, okay. So play around with that and just see which one you're able to feel. And then you could actually maybe say in utero, ask yourself, or make the statement in utero, my left hand was dominant, yes or no. Okay, in utero, my left ear was dominant, yes, no. Okay, I'm just answering, so just showing you if I'm saying yes and not thinking about it, I can override that. So again, you just want to let your body respond. This becomes the place where maybe you want to jot down what each side does. Robert Malelo in his work also has got a beautiful thing that he's put so much more in. And so we know the left brain is our logical brain. In our work, it's where we get the beta, it's where we get the Broca, it's where we get the Wernicke's, it's where we get those points that we're checking for spelling, for bearings, for word retrieval, for sequence and task. So we understand that. And then the right is more of our creative space. So Robert Malelo was explaining, and we learn more through the right at a younger age. We learn globally, we learn through movement, and we're going to see that coming up there now. But he was also explaining that the right-hand side does the gross motor muscles, so the bigger moves. And then our fine motor, again, that detail, because we're going to see those are the keywords for each side. The detail of the left brain is where we get all our fine motor skills. And so you can see I've also written them in two different fonts. So the print is nice and straight, and our green side there is more of a cursive writing that also just goes to show what connects with these all. And it's a nice little tool to have. So hopefully I won't overload you here, and I'll explain it better. But we also see these are the colors in our work that we use. So orange tends to be logic, green tends to be gestalt or creative side. And it's just these universal colors so that as we talk to our colleagues in that, we can understand which side we're looking at as we look at the colors. So the left, well, let's start with the right. This is where most kids are. This is why most children in grade R need to be moving and playing and using colors, because this is the way in which this brain learns. So it sees the bigger picture. Children who have this, we often see them procrastinate and step back and hesitate. They need to step back to see the bigger picture. It's all about language comprehension, image, emotion, and meaning. Funny enough, with all our work, it's the negative emotions that we see here. So our big depressive emotions that we see. Free with feelings. So they like rhythm, dialect, application. This time of the brain looks for similarities, and so this for me also is a big reason why our preschoolers are still swapping letters, because they're seeing that the ba and the da are the same, because they both have lines and they both have circles, and the pa and the qua. They're not seeing the detail that it's in a different space, and I think this is a big it feeds into this whole thing. So they see the similarities. They move with flow. They are all about the now. Everything's a feeling. They experience their day in terms of the moment. And so they're not planning for the future or the past. They enjoy patterns. They prefer drawing and manipulation. They like stimulation, or simultaneous thinking, so multitasking. So here's where often we'll have a child who in this work is said to be more ADHD, but in this type of stuff, we see them as being more right-brained. So, you know, chopping and changing, multitasking, busy with many things at once, only worrying about the now, not planning towards the future. So, of course, not so good with time management if they're sitting here. They learn in terms of visualization, color, the tactile experience, the kinesthetic movement, and they move very spontaneously, which, you know, the other synonym for that would be impulsively. They move with intuition and estimate, less time sense, and more about people orientation. Again, in our work, we see, you know, all the social aspects on the right, in the right lobe. So the left, they look at the pieces. So they see the detail first, and when they are balanced, they can put that in the bigger picture. Whereas as your people who are sitting on the other side see the big picture and battle sometimes if they're stressed to go into the detail and read it properly. Language, in terms of language, they look at the parts of speech. They're language orientated. We know it's that part of the brain, and then it's got higher betas. It should, and our beta brainwaves are our language brainwaves. It's all about planned, things being planned and structured, more future orientated, so planning going forward, conscious about time. They control their feelings, so they inhibit those impulses. Structure orientated, about syntax and semantics in terms of speech. They look for the differences. So the triune brain theory talks about that the left brain really only starts working properly at about age 7. Dr. Robert Mallela talks a little bit more about this orchestra as such, or the symphony that needs to take place between the two, and that this does start developing at age 3. But formal schooling is all about this, and we really only see this coming in according to the triune brain theory at 7. And this is why our grade 1s have such a hard time, because they're still all operating in this more gestalt place, and not so much this logical place. So we see sequencing here, which we know, we see it in our work. This part is about the letters, the printing, the spelling. It's all about the verbal, the word, numbers. I've said printing, I see it's there again. It analyzes, it's all about logic and technique and the linear steps. It's about detail. It can abstract stuff, and it listens to specific music notes and timing. So very, very interesting. Just a little side note here. When somebody is writing cursive, it ties up more to that right brain, that more free movement, the bigger movements obviously of the hand. And print ties up to the left, where it's those very small, jerky little moves of the hand, very precise. And so we can use this to our advantage. We could, if we have to write an essay or some creative writing, we can write all of our rough drafts in cursive to get those, to link with that language comprehension and with our emotions and our feelings. And then when we want to edit it, we can edit it in print. And we're giving our brain that clue to use more of the left brain so that we can look at the details in spelling and punctuation. Sure, I added this way back when, just after I'd been to Justine's stuff, and the writing's a little bit small, but I just found it fascinating just to see, and it's quite ironic, as you say, you know, we have ended up now. All these years ago, I was, you know, passionate about this, but just to see, obviously, in terms of our work and our little spots on the head, you know, what it is that we're seeing. And of course, we understand as well, which we're going to get into just now, that the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and that the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. And yeah, we can really get into detail about all these little things. It's a little bit blurry, but I know that you know what it's about. And we're going to see our orange side. So that's our left side, is where we want higher betas, so that faster brainwave. And then, of course, our right side is where we want alpha. Yeah, so I just found that very interesting. So this is where I get a little bit thrown, because my ATNR is always out to play. So I've swapped her around, hence the green is swapped and the orange is swapped. So if the person is looking at me, obviously I've got to always keep in mind where is their right and where is their left, which is a trick for me, I can tell you. Okay, what happens to each side under stress? And so the left side No, well, let's start on as we write. So the right side loses the ability to reason well. So we think little Lenny in that story is a right-brained kid, acts without thinking, feels overwhelmed, has trouble expressing, cannot remember the details, so his details was the spelling, and may appear emotional, so that's frustrated, angry, or depressed, or spaced out. Okay. And then our left brain child, our more academic child, well, they just start trying harder with lots of effort. These end up being our little workaholics or perfectionists. They don't get many results because, of course, they can't see the bigger picture. They can't put it in context. They're only looking at the detail. So they're doing these things, as I say, without that access to the comprehension. They've also gated off from the emotions. So without joy, without understanding, and then they appear mechanical, tense, and insensitive. So I've explained this a couple of times. I've even explained it at church because I think it's very important to understand. And I've done this with parents and children. So I've mapped out the parent's profile and then the child's profile. And this is great for teenagers and all sorts. We're actually doing a Zoom one of these days where Sonia's going to get into all of this. So let me know if you want to be a part of that. They're free Zooms, and she's talking about behavior and this brain organization. And so let's think about the absolute worst thing that can happen is death. And so what happens when somebody dies? We have family fallouts because of this. And so the left brain person everybody's under stress. But the left brain person who tries harder with lots of effort and becomes mechanical and tense and insensitive, they're the type who are on the phone first thing in the morning, talking about policies, quickly, doing all the financials. And then they move into the house, and this is where it falls apart. They start sorting out the house, giving things away, very, mechanically. You don't need that. It must go. And then, of course, the right brain person is the person who becomes incredibly overwhelmed and emotional, very sentimental. And, of course, they're the one who says, yeah, she hasn't even been dead for 2 weeks and you gave everything away and you've sorted everything out and you gave everything that was of her to someone else. And now you didn't realize that that little piece of paper had so much meaning for me, and I will never forgive you for this because you have been so cold and callous. And as I say, this is where people have fallouts with each other because they both equally are stressed, but their brain organization is meaning that they're dealing with the stress very, very differently. And so while the one becomes not emotional, very mechanical, the other one becomes, too emotional. And so the one who's mechanical looks at the other one and says she's pathetic, she didn't help, there was so much to get done, there was so much to arrange for the funeral, she was nowhere to be seen, she was just crying all the time and being all dramatic. And if the other one looks back and says, yeah, and she's got no feeling, she's got no understanding of what I went through, she's just sorted things out without thinking about her best flowers and, what kind of colors she liked. And of course, as I say, I hope I'm explaining this in a way that makes sense. This is not in the book because, of course, she uses muscle checking for the hemispheres. This is something that comes out of, I don't know where. I'll have to get back to you about it. But this is a way that we can also just ask because, not everybody is open to muscle checking to see which way the person is. And we want them to think about school. So if you're trying to work out a learning profile at school, we want them to think about school. If we're trying to work out how they are at home, then of course we want to think about them in the house. And so we can answer this according to that. And so remember, each place has got a different way that we might organize our brain. But we're going to ask, how do you prefer to work? So your left brain person will like to work by themselves. They will work very methodically, one thing at a time. They might prefer working on paper. They might like plans to stay the same once they know what they are. They do exactly what they're told the way the teacher told them to do it. They learn by writing and talking. The playing here is more the right brain side. So rather think about the writing and the talking, the languages here. Remember, the left brain being the language side. They get straight to work. They don't get upset easily. They're happy when they finish their work. They're ticking it off on a to-do list. They like, again, that has been repeated in the notes that I had. So they do the tasks the way they're told. Their mood stays the same. They like things to be orderly and tidy when they're working, and they usually like maths and English. This is just generalization, so you'll have to, yeah, ask and see what it is. Your left brain people often are your talky people because it is the language side of the brain, and they tend to be more extroverted, if I can say that. Your right brain people are actually often more introverted, and they're more thinking colors, and they like, singing and that kind of stuff as such. If I can try generalize it, they can be quieter, but of course we can also see that because the left brain is the part that inhibits stuff, that right brain frontal lobe damage can actually cause a right brain person to be very talkative, so, and not have the inhibition, if I'm saying that right, the control to stop their talking. So the right brain person likes to check in regularly with the teacher. They get bored and they're doing a lot of things at one time. They often are talking about their learning, and they don't mind if plans change. They're very much about the here and the now. Having said all of that, you're going to get with kids them ticking off both sides, and it's to see which one they're ticking off more, because reflexes can also make somebody like routine. So that might not be a left brain trait coming through, but rather a fear thing coming through. And so it's just to be open to that. They like to work in their own way when they can. They practice what they're learning by drawing pictures, playing games. They take their time. So this is one of the big ones I look at. So they don't get started. They sit back in the chair. They hold back. They procrastinate. They hesitate. So you can just see also as I go through this why these kids get accused of sometimes being a bit ADHD as such, if I can be as bold as to say. Their feelings are easily hurt. They are happy when they've worked well. So they're also the kids who won't tick it off the list. They go back and they want to change this and they want to change that. And so we can see the creativity coming out through that right brain there. They like to know the task and then they do it their own way. And they have many feelings in a day: happy, sad, angry, confused, yucky feelings. And so we can see that emotion in them. Our right brain stuff, again, you see the more lower moods with regards to the right brain. They like to work and they do not worry about being tidy, and they enjoy lessons where they can be more free. So often art and music, but if they're not good at art, it might be your movement things, remembering that the right side is the gross motor skills, the left side is the fine motor skills. The right side of the brain is this child who wants to move, experience, explore. They remember what they did through the emotions they felt and the colors and the shapes and the patterns. And of course your left brain person is that kid who can sit still and is looking at the words and the text and the spelling. Yeah. And so I hope that paints that difference for you there. So we can look at eyes. What do the different eyes mean? So this becomes very important a bit later. But the left eye looks, again, it's the logical eye. It's looking for detail. It's analyzing. It's doing things in a linear sequence. It's specific. It looks for symmetry. It looks for line. And it also is more or better with the two-dimensional work. And it also tends to put vision in the past. The most important thing I always look for straight away here is the left eye tracks left to right. So is better at reading languages like English. Okay. The right eye tends to see the image, the patterns, the big picture, the emotions, the three-dimension, the color, and future possibilities. And so if we've got a dominant I've got to think now. Dominant left eye, because now it's going to be the opposite. Then we've got a child who's tracking right to left. So this eye might jump, especially when they're stressed, and the left eye isn't there to support that left to right movement. Then this eye is going to want to read backwards. So the ears, the opposite ones again. So the right ear is our logical ear, and the left ear here is our gestalt ear. Remembering that it swaps as it comes into the brain for processing. So very important, again, just in terms of teaching, the way I put it across to parents. If I'm listening with my logical ear, I'm listening to the details and the facts. I can also break sounds up into their components. which you'll see at the end there. So I can hear cat, I can hear the k, I can hear the a, and I can hear the t. So that's much better for phonetics. If I've got the left ear, then I hear the whole word. So I don't know where each sound starts and begins. It blends and mushes into one. So that's not so great for phonetics. The left ear also listens to the tone of one's voice and the emotions and pitch. And so the teacher who's all stressed might be saying nice things and trying to hold back her emotions. But if it's slipping out in her voice, these kids are going to pick it up and it's going to stress them out. And so they're not listening to what that person is saying. They're listening to how that person is saying it. And I've had quite a few kids in my space where this ear comes up and they're really battling in the classroom because this is pushing them into the fact that they're picking up on the teacher's stress, pushes them into their stress profile, learning profile. So left word listens to words, syntax, covert speech, so inner speech, the lyrics of music, specific notes, so it's that detail in the song. It can isolate that. Details, linear sequencing, so it will remember the order in which things were said. It listens to symbols as such, so that's a more abstract type. It analyzes, and as I said, it breaks sounds into smaller pieces. The other ear listens to rhythm, tone, dialect, pitch, image, understanding, perception, and of course it's about patterns. Okay, the right, am I saying it right? The right hand use is the orange there, and it's the hand that needs to talk. So we see the language linked to that. It analyzes, it takes notes often, prints, prefers printing, and is exact with communication. These are the kids who talk to you in bullet form. So they kind of battle in essay writing, especially if they're stressed. They can give you the facts, almost one by one, but ask them to put it in an essay, they might struggle with that because now they've got to obviously put it within its context in a bigger space, especially when stressed. When not stressed, they're obviously going to be able to do that much more easily. The other hand here is about manual hands-on learning. So we can already see learning types coming out with these. Emotional and physical expression, more tactile, uses gestures when they talk, and these children tend to communicate in the stories using metaphors. So especially if it's linking to the right brain, then they need to paint the scene and introduce the characters and really work up to the point they're trying to make, if they ever get to that. So the feet represent stepping forward in life. Sorry, I forgot to explain. The eyes obviously represent what we see, the ears what we hear. The hand represents communication both verbally and in writing. And the feet represent movement, so genuine movement in life, stepping forward. But also like motor planning. How do I take the next step in my work as such? And so I see this, at least the way I see this, is like the way the child is working through the worksheet or the activity. What is the next step? What is the next step, if that makes sense? So of course the logic foot makes planned steps, follows step by step. And it says, she says, allows to follow specific dance steps. It really means to be able to do sports and that, so physical movement with technique. There's technique to it. But the other foot, the gestalt foot, the left foot, is more about free form movement, moves with emotion, is more rhythmic and spontaneous. So under stress again, these children might be seen as being impulsive because that spontaneity is a little bit of moving forward with intuition. So I'm going to show you the way I like to do it. I actually prefer using the brain bug to her domino man. You haven't seen her domino man yet. So let me show you a brain bug. Sorry, battling, I swallowed the water the wrong way. So this is a brain bug, and the reason I like the brain bug is just because teaching grade R, I keep swapping my left and right around. I've always got to remember, is it the opposite? Is it the right one? And that just comes from years standing in front of the class. And so for me, for this one, it's as they're standing, if they were standing behind me and I was looking from top to bottom. And so I just find it easier to map this way. And so here you can see I've answered those questions and I've arrived up with more ticks on the left. So of course I've colored in the orange side. The eye that I checked, and I must show you how we check them. Okay, I think we get to that. So the eye that came up was the left eye. The ear that came up was the left ear, the right hand, and the right foot. And so what we can see here is that we've got an orange brain and an orange hand and an orange foot on the opposite side, which means the hand, which represents communication, can talk to the brain, and the foot, which represents movement and motor planning, can talk to the brain. But the eye has got no brain to talk to, and the ear has got no brain to talk to. And so where I've got that happening, so it's usually where I've got the senses on the same side as the hemisphere, I draw a circle, and those become my blocked senses. So this little kid, Seamus, got quite a bad thing, I can already tell you from just looking at that. And maybe it's nice to have little sheets that you make up for yourself initially that have this information on it. That's where I started. That means you can read it off very easily. So under stress, this child's not going to be able to perceive what they're seeing, and it's not going to be able to perceive what they're hearing. So this child is getting no information, just like myself when stressed, coming in. They can talk, but they're not going to be able to take in from that situation. And they can move. And so at least if they start moving, they're going to start accessing the whole brain and be able to use it all. And so that's the first issue. Can't see, can't hear under stress. Can talk, can move under stress. Okay. And then we start going into the details about all of this. Before I actually do that, the other important thing that I want is I want the hand and eye. I can say I want it. It doesn't mean I'm going to get it. But I want the hand and the eye on the same side. And the reason for that is that helps with hand-eye coordination. So the right hand there likes to move from left to right, and it pulls as it writes. Your left-handed kids have to push, and they're moving from left to right, which doesn't come as naturally, which is probably another reason that they tend to mirror. It's because it's much easier to pull when you write, and of course they're experiencing the letters, they don't know which is which, they don't have access to those details, and then they are pulling it instead of pushing it, which would be the right way for our reading. Hope that makes sense. And so we got a few issues here with regards to reading under stress. So this child can't see the information, and of course there's this clashing of the midlines. And so this comes up often with children with reading writing issues. Okay, then if we get into the nitty-gritties, when this left brain is stressed, they try hard with lots of effort, without results, without feeling, without understanding, and may appear tense, mechanical, or insensitive. The eye that they're using tracks the opposite way. So this eye tracks from left to right, which means their eye is going to be jumping without the other eye supporting. They're going to battle in tests. I'm just having a long conversation on Facebook about a lady who clearly marked a test and nailed this poor child because this child gave the right maths answer, but they asked for 3 groups of 5, and this child drew 5 groups of 3. Whatever, the other way around, okay? So I would have just failed. Got to the right answer, and of course this teacher's taken off marks. And of course all these teachers are saying, but they have to read the questions. So this eye has that issue. This eye will read in reverse. So he might read the 5 times 3 versus the 3 times 5. So the minute I see that in a test, like for this real life situation here, I actually would have looked at his dominance profile. So they would have been something I looked at. Yeah, so anyway, get me all upset. So here we see, so this person may feel stuck and battle to perceive what he sees and hears. His ear hears the emotion, it's the green ear, and how things are said, it doesn't hear the detail. This was somebody I was doing a thing on. So I said this little one can move and write and move forward, but can't take in information when stressed. So remember to breathe and to move the whole body to switch it on when studying and doing exams. So here's another little one. So you can see the same eye. So you can see the word cat will be read as tack, as they read it the wrong way, right to left. Okay, so they would be reading backwards. They can hear the full word cat. That ear hears the whole sound, not the individual sounds. Their hand is blocked. And here we've got a lot of green. So our green is our more creative side. And so this is a little boy. When he is stressed, we've also, got that cross dominance looking there. We talk about cross dominance when it's a different eye to hand. Okay. And he loses ability to reason well feels overwhelmed and has trouble expressing, cannot remember the details, feels angry, frustrated, and depressed. Okay. So again, looking at each eye, I didn't have all of those up, but again, we can very quickly see if it's the left eye, they're tracking right to left, they're going to read words backwards, and they're going to see the whole picture of the word. So you can see as I've drawn around that cat, I've drawn the shape of that word, where we've seen teachers do that. They're seeing the shape of the word. They're not zoning in and seeing the details, which is how the C looks, how the A looks, how the T looks. And then they're hearing the whole word. So the green ear is the ear that would hear the K, the A, and the T. And it would be better for phonics, being able to break up that word into its separate sounds. The left foot, the green foot, is going to be very spontaneous, working through things with intuition, whereas the right foot there is going to go step by step and might start at the top of your page and work down methodically. And so yes, I see I haven't written on the right hand side, but if you go to the bottom, that's what happens to that right brain. Loses the ability to reason well. So can you imagine this in a test? Feels overwhelmed, has trouble expressing, cannot remember details, appears angry, frustrated, and even depressed. So here are open profiles, so we call them. So when you look at this, this is her little domino man. So you can decide which one you like. They look at us. Domi for dominance, and knowing to know your dominance profile. Okay, so all the oranges means that he has access to all of the sensory organs. He can see, he can hear, he can speak, and he can do. But it's going to be very logical without creativity, without intuition. Whereas as our green one can see, he can hear, he can do, and he can move, but it's all creative in their creative space. And so they are still limited, even though they have access to all of these sensory organs. They are limited because either they can't connect it or comprehend it or put it in context if you're all orange, or if you're all green, you can't go into the detail. These are our children who have got a one-sided profile. So this is quite an issue here. So they can't see, can't hear, can't do, and can't speak under stress. And of course, you get the two variants of that. You've either got the left brain thinking, the orange with all the green senses, or you've got the right brain thinking, the green hemisphere with all the orange senses. So that's also very important. These children are going to have a huge problem. They tend to completely shut down when stressed, especially the one with the green hemisphere, and we're going to get into that. So this is in the book, and you've at least got it here. But of course, what you don't have is you don't have the actual writing. So in the book on page 55, this is how you'd figure out which profile to go and read. So having all these things, you've got now the brain, so you'd look the hemisphere either being orange for the left hemisphere, green for the right, and then you'd start. You'd look which hand is it? Is it the right hand, right eye, right foot, and you'd actually work your way through, and it would take you to the letter. And then in your book, you'd actually page to that letter, and this is where her book's quite helpful, and she tells you each of these. But as I say, it's not a must-have if you understand what each of them represent and what the child has access to. So I can definitely just help you out there. I've got a few forms I've created that makes it a little bit easier, but obviously you want to keep it in your hand so that you've got access to the information. Yeah, you don't just want to give it out. Otherwise, they will just read it and do it themselves. But yeah, I've created a bit of a thing just to help, like a cheat sheet. So profiles and relationships. Okay, this was a marriage. This was actually her marriage, Dr. Kala Hannaford, and Jim's profile. I'm guessing that's obviously her husband. And I can't remember the story about it. It is in my book somewhere. But as you can see, what is blocked? So we look for things that are on the same side. So of course, none of them can see. But Kala can't hear, can't speak, and can't do. So if she's stressed, she completely shuts down. And she shares, I think it's somewhere in this book, that she would have been written off. She would have been told she's hyperactive and that she's dyslexic. She only started talking a lot later, I think, was it? And she could only read it about the age 10. So she said, and now she's a doctor, she's a biologist, and she's so fantastic. So again, it's just to give children like the benefit of the doubt. Anyway, I'm so upset about this stupid little test and all these teachers who want to nail these children. And now I'm trying to think straight to talk to you, but maybe it's a good thing so I can just get my frustration out and share some of this and what these teachers are missing, if I can, because I know whose ears are listening. Okay, so Carla is completely limited. She can't do anything, so she feels incredibly overwhelmed and stuck. She can't speak, she can't talk, she can't get out. People might as well not show her things. When people are talking, she hears them talk, but it's blah, blah, blah. Now, her husband doesn't have access to sight, but and his foot. So he can't see and he can't move, but he can hear and he can speak. So if he's got far more available than her. So of course, if she's talking to him and he's just talking about all the emotional stuff that she's feeling, because she's going to be quite overwhelmed if she can get anything out, or she's acting incredibly emotional. He can't see it, but he can hear it. And then he will speak the details back to her. And so she might, but she can't hear those details. So even though he's the voice of reason, perhaps when she's stressed, he's got more that logical brain. She's talking about the feelings and her opinions and her beliefs, because that's a green brain. And he's coming with some facts and logic, but she can't hear it until she calms down. So she needs to move, she needs to breathe. And of course, we see the orange and the green. So he's going to become incredibly analytical, and she's going to become very emotional, and they will never be on the same page while they're upset. They will need to go away, they will need to move, they will need to calm down, and then both of them will have access to both sides of their brain and all their senses, and then they can be on the same page to talk. So I had something very similar with the mommies and the daughter that I was speaking about earlier on. And of course, the child is all green, and the mom is orange. And so there's no finding or being on the same page at this point, because the child will cling to the feelings and the emotions and become overwhelmed and possibly have a meltdown. And then the mom just gets cross and intense and insensitive and harsh. And of course, that's just going to trigger the emotions even more on the other side. Okay, so here, matching ones also don't work, as we can see, because here you can see again, everybody can talk, they both have access to their hand, they can process the logic, they can talk about the facts, but nobody can see the other one's point of view, and nobody can hear what the other one's saying. So everybody's just talking their own truths and facts, and nobody's actually listening or actually seeing it from a different point of view. But they both can just do. So I can imagine this is going to be these places where there's a lot of talking and but nobody hearing. And so that also doesn't help. And so no, if that answers your question, it doesn't help having the same profile either. Another one, and this is a true case study, there was this young lady who was doing very well in all her subjects except for maths. And every time she went to maths, obviously she can't have had, there might have been triggers. She might have done a maths test before where the teacher nailed her just saying for not answering the way the teacher wanted. Okay. She might have gotten some belief that maths is scary and she's not coping. So already being in that class pushes her into this profile. And of course, then sitting still doesn't help. And then this teacher, we can see, so the student is the one with the orange brain and the green eye, and the teacher is the one with the orange brain and the orange eye. And then their ears are different, if you notice. So the student's got the orange ear, the teacher's got the green ear. The student has the green foot, and the teacher has the orange foot. So there's quite a bit of differences here. The student has got two of their sensory organs not available when stressed, the eye and the foot, and the teacher only has one, the ear. And so, the teacher's stressed. Teachers are always stressed. The student's stressed. She's not getting the maths, and the student can't see because it's blocked during this time. So this student in particular was closing her eyes and turning her ear, because her ear, she had access to that ear. So she turned her ear towards the teacher to listen to how he was explaining. Okay? The teacher who uses vision to learn, he would say, open your eyes and look at me. And this was very interesting. It actually came up, and I didn't have room to discuss it in a meeting, where this one lady said, she finds it very rude. There's certain people who, when you're talking, they'll close their eyes and in the meeting, and then when you ask them, they say, but I'm listening. This is what this child is doing. And we can't, judge a person for doing that. They might have a blocked eye, and that visual distraction coming in is just too much that they can't focus on the words. And so what they're doing is they're closing that eye, what we did in the rain, with the kids screaming in the back. We always afford these things to ourselves, but we don't afford them to our kids in class. Makes me mad. But of course, this person is closing their eye, calming down all the sensory information coming in so that they can zone in on what they do have access to. And this kid was the ear. And of course, by him telling her to open her eyes and look, he was creating more and more stress for her, because again, that was overloading and overwhelming the system. So Kadla Hannaford came into the class and she was watching this play out, and then she was able to map these things. And so she said to him, you need to understand something. This student is trying to understand you and has a blocked eye. So when you are speaking with that stress, she's closing her eyes and she's zoning into what you're saying. And so now you, as the teacher, have to now do something about that. First of all, create a space, yes, of course, if we can, where children feel like they're safe, loved, and appreciated, seen and heard. But that seems sometimes to be an impossible task. So what can you do next? You're going to have to explain very well, step by step. And you're going to have to explain everything that you're doing so that she can hear those steps when her eyes are closed. So there's no point in basing your lesson on the visual here. You actually have to incorporate the auditory for this learner as well. And then this learner, having the green leg, is going to play around with those ideas and experience them for herself and work out her own way to do so. Whereas you are going to want step by step. And so be very careful, I'm just going to say to this teacher, with your marking. Because this person can potentially arrive at the right answer and have used, just like my little example now on Facebook, this different way of getting there. And you wanting to be done in your order and your steps, if you start penalizing her for this kind of stuff, is going to be a bit of an issue. So here's the actual story. This is a real situation that occurred in an intermediate school where I was a counselor for children who were having problems in school. It had to do with the 8th grade algebra student and her teacher. The student was sent to me because she was failing algebra. After assessing her dominance profile, I was surprised that she was having difficulty. With her logical hemisphere dominant, she would have been able to pick up the linear sequencing necessary to understand the algebra. And with her dominant right ear going into her logic hemisphere, she should have no problem with remembering the formulas. So remember, the ear is also to do with remembering or the details for algebra. When I asked her how she was doing in the other classes, she was doing A or B work. I was not surprised because she had a good profile for normal school curriculum, except for her eye. But most 8th grade courses were lecture-based and didn't require initial visual input. I decided to sit in on her algebra class to see if I could get a clue as to why she was having problems. The teacher had put her in the front of the class, so we also see the kids with the ears need to be more in the middle. Okay, in the front row. So our visual kids are often asked to sit in the front. So when their eye's not blocked, but they're able to use the eye, that's a sign that we can put them in the front. The ones with the ears, we usually put them in that middle row, and we want that dominant ear to the middle of the class where they can pick up that sound, not on the side, going to the side. Okay, so that's something else. Again, I've got it in my cheat sheet. When he talked about an algebra problem or wrote on the board, the girl would close her eyes and turn her right ear toward him. He would look at her in disgust and say, "Look at me, look at the board." As soon as she had to look at him with her limited eye, she would lose the whole concept. We all learn something that day. Because the teacher was such a visual learner, he expected his students also to be visual learners and also look at him. This is typical in many classes where the teachers insist on eyes forward or believe that the students are learning only if they are looking at the teacher or the board. People like the student who are auditory learners with limited eye under stress may need to close their eyes or look somewhere when attempting to understand a difficult concept. The teacher took immediate action, stepping forward with his dominant foot, apologizing to the student and asking her where she would prefer to sit. She chose a seat 2 rows back on the left of the room, where she could fully access her dominant right ear and not bother him if she didn't look at him. She began doing integrated movements to more fully access her eye, and within 2 weeks her algebra grades had improved greatly. Dominant profile learning profiles give us useful tools to assist others, learn to understand our mistakes, and be fully present with other people. Through this process, the teacher also began working on his limited hearing, which is his problem under stress, so that he could better listen to his students when they had difficulty. He admitted that when students came to him with problems like students who were failing, he would tell them to simply watch what he was doing. In this case, she needed him to verbalize the process in a logical manner instead. In cases with very kinesthetic students, he would have been more helpful by having them work with math manipulatives or do math problems while watching. Knowing about the dominance profile, learner profiles helped him greatly broaden his teaching skills and become a more highly effective teacher. So before I continue, what happens if you have an open profile and now you're trying to establish, is this child visual, auditory, or kinesthetic? So something that's not part of this course, but you definitely can do, is you ask the child a question and then you notice where do they go when they recall that information? Where do their eyes look? Do they look upwards? Either side is fine, or up in the middle. Do they look to the ears? And this is where I also usually look at which ear did they look to, because that's often the dominant one. Or do they look down to the ground? And so the kids who are looking up are looking where did they see it. The kids who look towards the ears are generally looking where did they hear it. And the kids who are looking down to their body are looking where did I experience it. Looking at some stereotypes here. And so our left-brained kids do better at school because school is all about sitting still and looking at the details and being visual and auditory learners. Whereas our right-brained kids often are more kinesthetic and hands-on, as we read. And so this is a very sad graph to look at because we see the number of gifted and talented children who are left-brained skyrockets. And then, of course, this whole graph is reversed as we get to special needs being the one that skyrockets under the Gestalt. This was part of a test they did. I can't remember what year. I think it does come up just now. Where they took 218 students and they mapped them out, and then they saw how are they busy doing in their SATs, I think it was. And so this is very, very sad. This actually just shows that school is catering for our left-brained kids, but not necessarily the right-brained kids. So on the side here, we've got the two profiles. On the left, we've got the orange. So if that's an open profile, all orange. And shame on the right here, if it's an open profile, all green. And in the middle, we've got what we call mixed profiles. So we're going to have the green and the orange sensory organs coming up. And so, of course, we can see that there's far better performance in the middle one here, and the majority of the kids sit there. Obviously, there's 32 different profiles. So, of course, most are going to be mixed. But if I can't see, I can hear. If I can't hear, I can see, hopefully. If I can't do, I might be able to write. And so that just allows the child to begin, even though they're stressed, to be able to do something when they're stressed. And of course, that's what we would love to have with these kids. So we're looking particularly at the children who have access to their ear versus the children who don't. So we're going sense by sense here. Okay, so the children who have access to their ear, it doesn't seem to be a big thing here. Funny enough, we're seeing that there's gifted children in many of the children who don't have access to the ear, but also look at the special education there. So both bars being very high there. Okay, whereas is the ones, so yes, it was these 218 kids that they did all these little tests with. What does this tell us? In schooling, it's all about looking, is it not? Because we've got the same graph happening here with whether the child has access to their eye or not. Okay, so yeah, sure. Gifted right up for children who've got access to their eye, special education down low. And then of the children who can't see, we've got the, gifted at the bottom, and we've got the special education sitting at the top there. So here, and I actually think these colors are swapped. It should be your left eye should be green and your right eye should be, these colors are the wrong way around. I made this graph, so apologies for that. It's black and white in her book. So these colors need to be swapped. And so our left eye tracks from right to left. So we can see we've got this graph that's causing much problems. And of course, this shows you what? It shows you that schooling is reliant on reading. Okay. And over here, we've got this graph over here that's the other way around for the child who's tracking left to right and can see the details. So the green, so the left should be the green, sees the picture of the word, sees the contents, but doesn't see the detail. And of course, the left here sees the details. Learning aids and strategies. Okay, so we need to learn with both hemispheres of the brain as well as both eyes, both ears, move both hands and move both feet. When we learn to use a whole brain integrated ways, we can achieve more, developing more varied skills and competencies. It's possible to become more logical and analytical or more creative and intuitive, getting right back to that picture I showed you in the beginning after that child moved. As we move through school and life, we have the opportunities to develop compensatory strategies. So these are things that can assist with each. And so we've got this right brain. We know how they learn. Well, they need to learn to make lists, to prioritize, to sequence and use flow charts, to attend to details, to learn time management. Force yourself to finish what you start. Use objective measures, quantify, use statistics, analyze decisions, and go through a logical reasoning process. So we're bringing the left and the brain in together. Albert Einstein was actually more right brain, believe it or not. And this is also why he battled at school. It's something I spoke about in my OBO introductory course. And they basically told him he's stupid and he might as well leave. Can you imagine? Einstein himself. But of course, what he used to do was he'd play music while doing mathematical equations. So he brought in the right brain and left brain activities together as well, which is a great way to get them both going. We can break large concepts up into smaller pieces, use outlines, draw pictures, make mind maps. So we're getting into that context and then zooming slowly into the content as we feel safe. Write poems or songs. So these children might learn from mnemonics, for putting things to a tune, for repeating songs and all that kind of stuff. Practice observing detail with line drawings. Practice sequencing when you communicate, and there are 3 points to discuss. 1, 2, 3. We're bringing the logic in there through the numbers. Study the detail of the plant. So obviously once you've chunked that down and there's not too much detail, that can help, and especially as we connect it, because they will see the connections. Force yourself to read and follow directions. The left brain person needs to be more in touch with their creative side, so we want them to try brainstorming and visualize unusual images in their mind's eye. Use pictures, symbols, and maps. Okay, pay more attention to gut instincts. Trust your intuition. Be aware of your emotions and express them, especially spontaneous joy. Be physically active, especially with highly interactive, non-competitive activities like hiking, swimming, yoga. Learn to accept and be comfortable with ambiguity and paradox. Use metaphors and emotional stories wherever possible. Practice saying things in a new way, in other words. Talk more slowly, using fewer words, and of course, role play. So you're bringing the creativity back into the logic. So we're teaching. So these are the compensatory skills they must learn. It's so much saying, okay, well, you're now right brain, and we must respect that, but we obviously need to start bridging that with these skills. The logical person in terms of art will look at the media, the perspective, the colors, how to blend them, the techniques, the brush strokes, okay? And your more creative person is going to look at the image, the emotion, the rhythm, the spontaneity, and they're going to be more intuitive. Okay, music for logic. So what's going to happen to the logic and Gestalt? The logic is going to look for the techniques of playing the instrument. They're going to look at how to read the notes, awareness of key, signature, and timing, and how to use the vocal folds for specific sound. That right brain again is listening to the image it creates, the emotion, the rhythm, the spontaneity, and the intuition. Dancing. So the child will do very logical, very specific dance steps, ballet positions for stability. They're going to look at the choreography, the actual steps that's been made out of, and how to move the eyes to maintain balance. But the left person again just moves freely. So this free form movement with emotion, with image, so again, we want connection of both, because obviously this again is an art form. Getting back to the art one, we want both because it's of course a way to express, spontaneity and emotion and image. Sports, the left person looks at the rules of the game, the techniques for the equipment, how to move the body for stability. The right person looks at the whole picture, rhythm, spontaneity, and has passion for sport. Most of our people who are more right-brained are very, very athletic, very good in their body, very good with the gross motor skills. And then with that fine motor being more left-brained, they come into the class and then we see poor handwriting, whatever. Okay, movement menus. Okay, so brain beneficial movement menus. Take a walk, start fast, then go slow, so we're moving the pace. Every cross movement of the walk becomes very conscious, so watching how your arms are swinging opposite to your legs. Exercises like Tai Chi, yoga, gymnastics, anything with cross-lateral stuff, aerobics. Our brain gym movements are great, so cross crawl, elephant, lazy 8, hookups. And then, of course, we do that slowly. We want to do it with balance. Balance is all where our vestibular system is and where auditory and visual stuff comes in. Dance, play musical instruments or sing. Knit, play with clay or plasticine. Hug, wrestle your friends, pets. Rough play is very important for kids, especially our boys, and tumble play. So we do that where it's going to be safe to do so. And we like it when parents rough and tumble with their kids. There's my little thing that shows you how it's going to move them out again. Climb a tree, do a rope course, walk across a narrow bridge, balance on the beam or tightrope, swim, ski, skate, and surf. Play cross-lateral games like tennis, soccer, volleyball. Take time to be quiet by yourself and even daydream. Okay, help for homolateral. So for vision of the both, do brain gym exercises. So our brain gym ones that use the eyes are brain buttons, lazy 8s for eyes, energy yawn, vision gym. Cross your eyes, move your eyes in all visual fields, dancing them around the room, blinking while tracking around the edge of an object with both eyes. Look at a magic eye picture. Those were those 3D pictures we used to have years ago, where you had to almost look through it to see what image was that 3D image pop out. Breathe deeply and rest your eyes on pastel colors or on a landscape. So we've actually got more cones for far vision, and we're doing too much two-dimensional work. And so that's where that comes in. And of course, the blue light is not good for our eyes. Take a walk in nature, letting your eyes gently lead you. EMDR, eye movement repatterning, desensitizing, whatever, I've got it all wrong now. That was all about this lady walking through nature, and she realized moving her eyes from side to side helped her process trauma. So again, it's so good to incorporate these things, especially because this is all caused by stress and stresses and anxiety and reflexes. And so, yes, that's so important. Practice visualizing colors, unusual patterns, and thinking visually. Develop a keen sense of observation by looking from very small objects to the whole picture and go back and forth. So zooming in, zooming out, and of course looking at the bigger picture, zoning in on one detail, for instance. Time and then several times, and then recall what you saw. Take eye time out and just shut or rest your eyes and follow a graceful hand dance with your eyes. Okay, ears, we've got thinking caps and L's we can do. We can do active listening with the partner, repeating back what they've said. Tone the vowels A, E, I, O, U by taking a deep breath in and saying the vowels in a long, sustainable manner. Very much to how people do, I suppose, when they pretend to meditate, or when they do, you know, just playing with that vowel and getting that limbic system to activate as we do that, because then all those little bones vibrate and that stimulates all that hearing and the goodness of that. In order for children to easily learn symbolic language, say the noun first so that they can focus on the object, and then add a qualifier. The balloon is red, rather than the red balloon. This is lovely. This is easy to do. So listen to 60 beats per minute music, the Largo and Adagio music of Baroque. That's very, very good and very easy to get access to on YouTube. Mozart also had some brilliant ones that I read up a whole case study done on that, and actually concentration with it. So read stories out loud with lots of expression, tone changes and foreign dialects. Sing a lot by yourself or in groups. Make rabbit ears by putting your fingers behind your ears and pulling them forward, and listen to yourself talk. There's also little things you can make out of PVC pipes, like whisper phones, and I've often had that in the class for kids to play with it. They can speak directly into the ear. Practice listening for tonal patterns, pitches, melody. So that's nice when you've got little poems coming out and you've got the little rhythm and the songs, and then the kid can just get that experience of the rhythm in which it is, and then you can add the pitch and melody and all of that. You obviously can do that with music as well. Tap out the rhythm of your speech patterns. So we do a lot of that at school. So of course then you're tapping out the syllables. Be very quiet and listen to your heartbeat, sounds of air molecules hitting your eardrums, and the silence between sounds. Reach out with your hearing as far as you can go to pick up distant sounds, and spend time in the dark without vision, forcing your ears to become more acute. Okay, communication, the kinesthetic ones, the manipulation stuff, lazy 8s for writing, double doodles on a stimulating surface like a rug or rough wall, or in rice or on sandpaper, stimulates both the sensory and motor cortex for the hand and auditory areas of the brain. Knit, do sculpture, play with clay. Consciously move each finger with both hand in all directions. Do finger mirror dances by putting the fingertips of both hands together and then move them to music. Practice communicating only with your hands. So of course, for your kinesthetic kids, you can understand sign language would be quite fun to play around with. And in my one course I did that. I found all the little letters so that children can actually learn the letters by looking at the hand sign as well. Play a musical instrument, do beadwork or anything else that requires conscious fine motor coordination of the hands. Throw a ball with alternative hands, write or draw with your non-dominant hand, and use large expressive arm movements in all directions. So lots of fun to be had. Okay, this is your hands. Okay, so since speaking with your hands, we can do the following. We can massage the temporal mandible joint. So that's called our energy yawn. And when we do that, we actually want to yawn and make the sound of a yawn to vocalize that. So that can activate the sensory and motor nerves that assist with vocalization. Intone the vowel sounds while opening and closing the mouth in different ways. So you're playing around with the vowels, changing the movements of the mouth, and seeing if that makes any difference. More benefit is gained if you use the whole mouth, full breath, and relax so that the sound comes out more as a tone that vibrates. Talk gibberish with somebody, making odd sounds and facial expressions, using all the various emotions, and sing a lot and do mock opera for fun. For the foot, Okay, so yeah, barefoot is always as often as possible so that you can experience all different surfaces on your feet. We want to do cross crawl, moving forwards and backwards or in circles. We want to do hookups, and this can be done with the eyes closed. So I can show you some of that. That is the stuff that we go through in our first course, all those movements. Take a walk starting out fast and then slow until every movement is very conscious. So becoming aware of our movement. That works nicely with SMR, you know, being able to watch our body and experience it and just take note of that. Do cross-lateral footwork like dancing, soccer, martial arts. Practice leading with your non-dominant foot. Do mirror movements with both feet, where each foot does the opposite action to the other one. And then waking up all your senses so you can give yourself a massage. And of course, there's all different types that we can do. This is just a suggestion from Jean Eyre's work on sensory motor integration. The various pressure has a profound effect on waking up the whole system to effectively take in and process information. In learning situations, in both adults and children, take a wake-up break and do it even if you're working alone. You can do a pizza, so I'll have to show you a pizza, or the mouse and cat and the rain. So I'm not sure about the mouse and cat and the rain, but there's beautiful little things that we can quite easily do on ourselves as well. Let me see if I can get through these quickly. Okay, in the classroom, I've kind of explained. Give the child a chance to choose their seat. Obviously, they sometimes choose because of their friends. But if you do this very, very quickly, so we didn't actually go through that, I'll explain it to you. How I check the hand is I look at which one they're writing with, and I'm looking at the hooked hand or the classic grip, because that's going to give me indication as to which part of the brain they're accessing. I then ask them to stand and pretend like they're going to fall forwards, but don't. You must catch yourself with your foot. And I'm watching for which foot steps forward to stop them from going forwards. I then tell them I don't do the lift, I don't do the thing, pick up a toilet roll and put it to your eye, because sometimes the dominant hand gets in the way of that. And so what I do say is go to my door and listen if you can hear my dog on the other side of the door. So the little kids love that because my dog's actually always there. Then they'll walk to the door and they'll put their ear on the door, and I'm looking which one did they put on the door. So very easy. And then I make them turn around and give me long arms and make a little triangle hole with their hands. So two hands out, making a triangle in the middle. And then I say, look at me through that triangle hole. And I'm looking back, so I don't have to ask them which eye. The eye that I can see through that hole as they look at me is their dominant eye. And then I go through that questionnaire, or I can muscle check to get the hemisphere. Okay, so that's how to do that. I should have actually put that earlier on. I thought it comes up here, but I see I didn't put it there. So choose where they sit. Visual kids must sit in the front. You're going to see, so visual learners, make sure you sit in the front of the class, preferably with the right eye dominant on the right side and the left eye dominant on the left side. Auditory learners can sit anywhere they can hear, but if their left ear is dominant, let them sit on the right to listen with the left. If the right is dominant, they want to sit on the left to listen. Sit on the left. If their right ear is dominant, they're going to sit on the left to hear with the right. The kinesthetic learners also may sit anywhere, but you often want to put them at the back where they're not going to disturb kids with their movements, and on the side, so not in the middle. So somewhere where they've got access to move a little bit more. And ultimately, you want to have some clay or other quiet material to handle and doodle while these children are learning. Reduce stress, reduce stress, reduce stress. So at this point I can sell my composure or our GABA. Okay, and of course stress is the culprit that keeps you in these profiles, whether it be the basal or this learning one. Even if you've learned compensation and adaptive strategies, they will disappear in a stressful situation. You'll forget them. Suddenly you may not hear as well or see. Suddenly you have trouble communicating. You become clumsy. You may become too linear in thinking or want to be physically withdrawn from the situation. However, you learn to function better and develop competencies beyond your basal profile when you reduce and counteract stress. So again, you can have all these things in place, and when you're stressed, you're still going to see it. Neurofeedback brings down that tone in the brain so that it doesn't happen so much. Integrating reflexes stops the body triggering it, but obviously there's still going to be things that are going to stress us out. And of course, it would be great to notice these profiles so we can notice within ourselves when we are thinking that way. Because if we can at least notice, we know I need to walk, I need to move, I need to do a breathing exercise. And those are the techniques that are going to come in. Some things to alleviate stress. So here's some of our stuff. Hookups, take a walk, in nature preferably, do your energy yawns, your elephants, your yoga, your tai chi, your sing, hum or whistle, play musical instruments, hug, wrestle with your kids, your pets, your mate, do brain gym, especially hookups and lazy eights, drink a lot of water, when we dehydrated, the body's under stress, breathe slowly and deeply to release tension in your muscles, hold your forehead lightly until you feel a pulse, that's our positive thinking, knit, play or do plasticine, draw or doodle a picture using both hands at the same time, listen to integrative music, so classical's great, complex rhythms of African, I haven't really done that. Focus on positive aspects of a situation, perhaps the lesson that you're learning from experience. Okay, and then find humor in the situation. Initially be present, focus on your surroundings and what you're grateful for. And then if you have any questions, let me know.